Russell here again. So today I'll be doing a review on the Jackson Racing Turbo Kit for the Honda Talon. I have approximately 7,000 miles on it. I'll tell you some of the things I like about it and the problems I've had over a 7,000 mile period. All right, so with the turbo kit, you can expect around 170 crank horsepower and roughly 150-ish wheel horsepower. That's a huge difference. Once you drive the turbo, it makes it very difficult to drive the NA again. So this turbo kit does come with this flashing tool, and so every once in a while there will be software updates. Like the last software update, they added launch mode to all of the non-live valve models. The other thing is if you're switching tire size, you can go between 28, 30, and 32-inch tires. So it remaps the transmission for those tire size, which comes in very, very handy because I do run 28s on the racetrack and I run 32s normally. So it's very nice switching back and forth with that. It only takes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes to reflash that. The only thing it doesn't do is adjust the speedometer. So in my experience, if you're running 32s, you need to add 10% to your speed and to your distance. So when the speedometer says 70 miles an hour, my GPS is saying I'm actually going 77. Or if I go on a 100-mile trip, I actually went 110 miles, if that makes sense. So this doesn't adjust for the speedometer for tire sizes, but it remaps the transmission. So one thing I do not like is where Jackson Racing put the air canister, and basically it's going to be underneath this cover. So that means you have, I don't know, like 10 or 15 push rivets you have to take out. And they just use the same location that the factory setup used. And it's just a huge dust vacuum down there. So you can plant in dusty conditions. You're going to need to clean the filter every 300 to 500 miles. And it's probably easiest because if you're familiar with K&N filters, usually they recommend a 24-hour turnaround period from cleaning until you can reuse it. So just keep that in mind. All right, so here I am taking the Jackson Racing air filter apart for the first time, and there's just mud and dirt and grime caked in this. I mean, so because I don't want to clean that filter every 300 miles in dusty conditions, I just kind of set up this system, and I have a separate video, so I won't go into super depth on that. But so right here is the Jackson Racing air canister, which has a K&N filter. I'll pop some pictures of it in there as well for you. But what I've done is put the S&B particle separator, and like I said, the install video will be in the description. But since the install video, I welded in a 7-inch piece of pipe there to spread the width of that spare tire mount and raise it up higher, so the rear panel is not restricted as far as view goes when you're looking to the rear. So with this setup, I usually get 2,000 miles out of air filter. But what I do is every time I change the oil, every 1,200 miles, I just clean the filter at the same time, and then everything is working perfectly. So if you're going for the Jackson Racing Turbo Kit, I highly, highly recommend the particle separator, and I'm very happy with the setup. I have thousands of miles on it. So one issue, like the intercooler on this does work pretty well. There's a fan on the bottom side that runs all the time, and then it'll run a minute or two after you shut it off. So it's basically taking cool air and blowing it down on top of the engine. But the problem with that is every once in a while, you have to open up the rear cover, clean the debris off, which is not a huge deal. It's just something to keep an eye on because, like right now, this is going to restrict its functionality. I mean, because it's probably 30% blocked or more right now. So just keep that in mind. All right, so what we have here, this is the motor mount on the passenger side. This is the turbo support bracket. One thing I did not long after I installed the turbo kit was I welded this bracket to the motor mount right there. Okay, that took an extra 5 minutes because what happened was there's only one bolt, and there might be updates to this kit that I'm not aware of because I do have one of the first kits, but on my kit there is just one bolt holding this bracket to the motor mount, and that worked its way loose, and it's really a pain because you kind of have to lift the motor up, remove that motor mount just to tighten the nut up on the backside. I know a few people have found a workaround for it, but in my experience, I had to, that's what I had to do to tighten it up. So when I found that it was loose, I just took the motor mount off again. I ran a bead on each side of that bracket, and then I haven't had any problems since. So that was my first issue, and like I said, I highly recommend taking the motor mount completely out, just so you don't have current running through any of the electrical stuff on your Talon. So take the motor mount out, have two welds put on there, and you'll be good to go. So another issue I had is my exhaust manifold here. I had a hairline crack in it. I called Jackson Racing up. They overnighted me one because I was on my Mexico to Canada trip. Threw it back in, no problem. I think that was kind of a rare freak thing. I don't think it'll be something you have to look for. All right, so an issue I've had twice. If you can look, I'm gonna try right down there is that little tiny bolt, okay? That holds this bracket up to the turbo. And I've had on 2 different occasions where the heads of both bolts, and there's one lower that you can't quite see in the video, where the heads of those bolts were broken, and then this bracket just sits there and flops. And that was replaced twice under warranty. So Jackson Racing sent out 2 new turbos. So this is actually my 3rd turbo, but I haven't had any issues with the turbo other than that little bolt, those 2 little bolts breaking. So things to watch out for, and Jackson Racing has actually made some improvements, so you might not have this problem. But there's 3 bolts holding the turbo to the exhaust manifold, and the 3rd one's here on the back side that you can't see. But over a 7,000 mile period, I've had those work loose, 15 to 20 times. And then also the 2 turbo exit bolts, so right there, those will work themselves loose as well. So I highly recommend getting the air fuel ratio gauge, which mine is actually right there. I have a separate install video for that as well. I can put in the description. But the reason I recommend that is because every time like some of these bolts come loose, I'll start getting ultra lean air fuel ratio readings in the cab. And then when that happens, I know like, okay, pull over, take 3 minutes, tighten up those bolts, and we're good to go. So I would definitely consider getting an air fuel ratio gauge if I were you. So when it comes to the exhaust system, Jackson Racing is going to tell you from day one, do not run anything but the stock muffler. And there's multiple reasons for that, but probably the main one is going to be emissions, because this is a carb legal unit, which is a huge deal. So if you do run an aftermarket exhaust, because most aftermarket exhausts, what they do is they eliminate some back pressure, and then they lean out your air fuel ratio, and then they give you like 2 or 3, 4, 5 more horsepower. Okay, so if you do decide to run an aftermarket exhaust, again, I highly recommend the air fuel ratio gauge, because that's going to ensure that exhaust does not run your system too lean and cause engine failure. So go for the, I spent $200 on the air fuel ratio gauge, highly recommend it. But yeah, just consider that. So I've had several conversations with Jackson Racing about my S&B setup with their turbo kit. And their main concern with my setup was not getting enough air to the engine, which is a legitimate concern. But in the thousands and thousands of miles I've tested this system, I have not seen anything that would hint that it's not getting enough air. Because with the air-fuel ratio gauge, if I wasn't getting enough air in the system, I would have some rich readings. But my air-fuel ratios, which should be about 14.7 at idle at a normal operating temperature, to approximately 10.5 at full throttle, full boost. So with this setup, I highly recommend it, and I haven't had any bad air-fuel ratio readings because of it. So after 7,000 miles, I do recommend the kit. I've had a couple of small issues. Every so often I had to tighten up some bolts, which only took 3 minutes. Everything was covered under warranty, so nothing has really been out of pocket. But the turbo kit really turns this into a totally different machine. I highly recommend it. If I had to do it over again, I would buy it. 7,000 miles with it on, and everything is still running perfect. The Talon's not burning any oil. I haven't had any transmission issues. I mean, for 10,000 miles on the Honda Talon, it's been holding up exceptionally well. Like I said, I had 2 driveline issues, but that was even before the turbo kit was installed. And so I have 7,000 miles on this driveline with the turbo kit, no issues. And so I haven't had any negative side effects on the Talon in those 7,000 miles. But I've had an enormous amount of fun with it and really enjoy the power. I know, speaking with Oscar Jackson Jr., he's mentioned that they're going to come out with a upgrade to this kit that's going to produce more horsepower. I'm really looking forward to that. But in ending, I would definitely watch my particle separator install video specifically for the turbo kit, because nobody wants to get in there and change out that filter every 300 miles. So very, very happy with the kit, and I highly recommend it. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks for watching. I really appreciate it, and thanks for all the support.